Hi, my name's Kevin. Decided to do this video response to a guy who was on the Blade forums, and he was questioning. I think he was questioning, do I need a lot of tools to make knives? Do I need a grinder? Do I need a mill machine? Do I need, all the heavy-duty stuff that you see the guys on YouTube? A lot of the guys, the good guys, who we should be emulating, and that's a good thing. We should be emulating what they're doing, but my take on it is, I'm a hobbyist. I enjoy making knives just because it's a hobby that's relaxing to me. Get to work with my hands, and number one, it's teaching me patience, which I think is something that's a really difficult thing, especially starting out. You want to get in there and make the knife of your dreams to start out. You want to be able to turn them out and be as good as the guys that you're seeing. And there's a lot of really awesome knife makers out there. And it's good to learn from them, but you also have to realize that they weren't always that good. Everybody's got to start somewhere. So I figured I would do this video just to kind of show what you can do on a shoestring. I would consider myself frugal to the point of cheap. Right now I'm operating out of a well house. It's 110 years old in the house that I currently own. I have a 4-car garage, but I have family members who are building a house, and everything they own is in that 4-car garage. So right now I'm relegated to a very small space, probably 8 by 10, and I'm sharing it with a lot of my kids' toys, a lot of my father-in-law's gardening implements, of which he has a ton, and lots of other stuff. But I just want to kind of go through what I think is necessary, what works for me, and it's mostly stuff I just learned on YouTube and Blade forums, and watching guys who I respect their work and what they're doing. So I'm just going to show the kind of stuff that I have here, so let's take a look around. Alright, so as you can see, this is back towards the door. Got a lot of stuff in here. Anybody need a rake? A hoe, shovel, multiple rakes? Yeah. So going left to right, just some of the equipment that I have. I haven't bought very much at all for making knives. A lot of the stuff I already had. So table saw, not something you need. Definitely not something you need. I really just use it for making, if I need to cut down some, like a large block on my micarta, to square it up, that sort of thing. If I'm working from raw hunks of wood and have to dimension it, I may use that. But like trying to cut small scales on a bandsaw is pretty dangerous. It's touchy stuff. I don't like to do it. Bandsaw or something else is definitely the way to go on that, so we'll get around to that. Should probably go in order of usage. So there's two things that you definitely want to have, that I feel you definitely want to have. A drill press is one of those things. This is a very cheap Harbor Freight drill press. My father-in-law bought it years ago, forgot that he owned it, and in the process of moving his stuff said, "Hey, look, a drill press. Do you want this?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely, I do want your drill press." You can drill straight holes by hand. I've done it. There's my hand drills. But it is difficult. Trying to drill straight pinholes through scales and drilling through steel is difficult with a hand drill. But this is a cheap model. It's worked for me so far. It has adjustable speed. I have it cranked down pretty low because cutting metal is something you want to take your time on. I also use it, you can see here, I'm using it when I make Kydex sheaths. I'm using it as kind of a makeshift arbor press. Probably not the best use of it, but it's not a real heavy-duty use. The brass seems to, I don't have to press too hard. I will eventually probably invest in an arbor press. Right now I'm using that. It is doing a great job compared to hammering. I'm not splitting rivets anymore. So until I can get an arbor press, that is working for me as well. Bits, step bit. You definitely want a couple of step bits for cutting steel. That's worked out really well. You can also use them to kind of chamfer the holes if you need to and clean them up. I'll even use them to clean up the holes in the Kydex after I've drilled holes in that. Using a regular bit, I'll use a step bit as kind of a reamer a little bit just to chamfer the hole. This is my Kydex press. So all it is a couple of pieces of MDF, and I've got some foam. I did buy the foam from I forget which one, Jant Supply I believe it was, but actually you could just use like anti-fatigue mats, something like that will work as well. I knew I wanted to make Kydex for other projects as well, so I went ahead and invested in that. and I clamp that. Now, you can make a press with hinges. It's probably a good idea. I've just been doing it straight up, putting one on top of the other, and it's worked so far, so I'm kind of going with that for now. Maybe I'll make a better press down the road, but so far, I think technique and patience is more important than tools. That's kind of the theme of this whole thing. That is the 4 clamps that I own. I don't own any other clamps. At least I don't use any other clamps. They're just 4 fairly small Irwin clamps. I use that to press. I use that for my Kydex press. I also use them to clamp down my bench grinder and other tools because I have to be able to move them around because I'm dealing with small space. I also use them to when I make micarta, to compress the micarta. So I use it for that. I even use them for scale setup, although you really, if you're doing a good job on keeping your flats flat, you really don't need something that strong. A regular spring clamp will work. I'm just really careful about how much pressure I use when I'm putting a knife together. I don't want to squeeze all the epoxy out, so I will go ahead and use those, but I'm just, you know, delicate when I use it. Okay, we already talked about the drill press. Again, it's a smaller one. It works okay, though. Okay, over here, I've got a 4x36 combination sander. I don't use this much. It's not something I would buy. Again, this was another one of those found items in my father-in-law's garage. I do like it for making, like, flattening out material, like handle scales, if you're making your own scales, to flatten them out or true them up. It works well for that. If you need a large radius, if you're, you know, sanding like inside, you know, knife handles, like the tang, if you're doing a curved tang, it can work for that. But again, not something I would buy. It's not a necessity. Okay, the number 2 item that I definitely would buy if I was going to buy 2 pieces of equipment for knife making is this little guy. So it's a very bottom end. It's a 1x30 Harbor Freight grinder. You look up on YouTube videos of guys making knives with these things, and there are dozens, if not hundreds, of videos of guys using these with varied amounts of success, to grind out knife blades. You can make jigs for it. You can alter the table. Okay, I'll tell you 2 things about it, and well, at least one thing about it. One thing is you got to make sure the platen is straight and flat. That's important. So the platen on this thing's kind of a joke. I always keep my safety glasses right on the grinder, by the way, so I can't use the grinder without at least moving the safety glasses, and the idea is to put them on your head. So you want to make sure that this platen is running nice and straight with your belt, so that when you press on it, it's making full contact with the platen. That's kind of key and critical. Make sure it does have 2 Allen screws down in here. Make sure you adjust it so it's running nice and flat parallel to your belt, so that you can get a nice flat grind. If you don't do that, you're gonna be frustrated. Okay, and you'll think it's you, and you'll want to make jigs, which is what I wanted to do. And then I started looking hard at my equipment, and I realized, hey, you know what? I'm not even starting from a good place. So I trued up my platen. It took a little bit of time to make sure it was straight, and I just freehand grinds now, and it works fine. So yeah, so look at what you're using first. If you go ahead and buy something, especially if it's cheap, I was going to say even if it's cheap, especially if it's cheap, make sure it's straight and true at least. And I will say, you know, I got this thing on sale, it's like $34. It's been great, and I use it for all kinds of other stuff. I use it to grind blades. I use it to sharpen my knives, at least early stages. Then I go to a whetstone and honing. I use it around the house too. I sharpen tools with it. I also profile my Kydex with it. You know, sand the edges once I have it all put together to smooth it out. It's a great tool. I use it all the time now. It's you know, I think even if down the road, hopefully, and I move to a big grinder, I think I'll keep this around just for like little things. But the grinder, you just use it a lot. Okay, number 3 on the list, I think, and I was surprised about this one because I was using a bandsaw previously. It was my dad's, and he actually had to get it back, so I had to give it back to him. This is a little, again, like a Harbor Freight or whatever, cheap scroll saw. This thing, I'll tell you what, is really good for cutting Kydex. It's really precise. You can cut curves with it. I don't really have to cut tight curves, but when you're cutting Kydex, it's nice because, you know, and it keeps the sawdust to a minimum. It's very easy to work with, I find. I also will cut my scales, at least profile them rough. My Micarta scales, I'll profile them with this just to get them close. So this has actually been pretty good. So, you know, that maybe would be 3 on the list. Although if I was going to buy a saw, I'd probably buy a bandsaw. Something that could maybe handle steel for cutting out blanks. Which brings me to cutting out blanks. Lots of guys use angle grinders. I'm not a guy who makes a living with his hands. I'm a project manager, but I know my way around tools, and I worked my way up through the construction industry at one point. So I will say an angle grinder scares the heck out of me. I don't like using it, especially with cutting wheels. I will use an angle grinder after I've roughed in as much as I can on my blanks. I'll use an angle grinder to get closer to the line before I start using my bench grinder. Of course, if I had a better bench grinder, I wouldn't even bother with that. If I had a 2x72, for instance, I wouldn't even do that. I would just get it close and then use the grinder. But being what it is, I do use a grinding wheel, not a cutting wheel. So what do I cut my blanks out with? Right now, I'm using a Sawzall with just metal cutting blades. You want to use a, there's a calculation for this, I forget what it is, but you want to have as many, I have 14 teeth per inch, and that's like the minimum for cutting 1/8 inch. I know, you look it up online, you can figure it out. You want to make sure you don't have too few teeth per inch for the thickness material you're cutting, because otherwise it'll bind the saw up. You want to make sure you have several teeth, I think it's like at least 2 or 3 teeth on the material at all times. But this actually works pretty good. I clamp it up in my vise. Yeah, that's my vise. It's the smallest vise in the world. For a knife maker, that's really laughable. So go ahead and laugh, that's fine. It's worked okay. I actually have access to a bigger vise, but I'm afraid with the ricketiness of this table that it won't even hold it up, so I'm going to wait till I'm back in the garage to use that. This thing works okay though, for what I need. Holding pin stock, that sort of thing. And I do clamp my blades in this thing. It is pretty strong. And I will profile my blades with a Sawzall, which I already had, so I didn't have to buy it. And it works decently well. Gets me close. I feel a lot safer using a Sawzall, a lot less sparks, and a lot less likelihood that the blade's going to explode and you know, maim or kill you. So that's that. All right, on to other equipment. Forge. I want to do everything myself that I can. I don't like buying stuff. I don't want to send stuff out to heat treat if I can help it. Down the road, maybe, but right now it's a learning experience. So I built my own forge. It's a paint can. It did take a while. I'm not going to go into how I constructed this thing, but I will, because there's plenty of videos on it. But one thing I will tell you is there's lots of people out there telling you what to use for refractory. I would say there's really 2 ways to go. Number one, you can go with Innswool, which is it's like a rock or glass type insulation for furnaces. Lots of people use that. Lots of people have a lot of good luck with that. What I did was I made my own refractory, and what I used was perlite, not vermiculite. You want to use perlite only. You can find it in Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. They use it as an additive for soil. Okay, so you use that and you mix it with furnace cement, which you can also find at Home Depot or Lowe's. It's the cement that you use to repair like cracks in your chimney, that sort of thing. You want to water down the furnace cement until it's the consistency of kind of like melted ice cream, like it flows, okay, but not too watery, just enough that you can work with it. You mix that furnace cement, 1 part furnace cement to 4 parts perlite. You mix it up, it'll just stick together when you squeeze it. You can use that in here, and then you want to, you know, and then just follow all the other people's directions. Don't use sand and plaster Paris. It doesn't insulate. It's just garbage. When this is running full bore and it gets hot enough to heat treat 1095, 1080, whatever, not some of your hotter steels, but it gets darn hot darn quick and it contains the heat very well. I can touch the outside of this. It's hot, but it's, you know, safe. Now, I also move stuff away from it when I'm using it. I try to be safe when I'm, you know, heat treating, keep a fire extinguisher close by. But I've been pretty impressed with the insulating properties of this thing. I am going to cut a hole through the back, though, to work bigger blades, but so far, you know, it's been fun. And hey, you know, I made my own forge, and I get to heat metal, like, super, super hot in it, so that's pretty cool by itself. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. All I can say is, take your time. It's not the tools, it's the person. It is, you know, it is, in my opinion, you could make a knife better than 90% of the people out there starting out with a bastard file, your couple different levels of sandpaper, and a drill. I mean, that's pretty much all it takes. You could do lots of things. You just got to take your time. Realize it's not the tools. You know, I golf, not as much as I used to, but when I started golfing, I didn't go buy a $1,000 set of golf clubs because I knew that my skill level wouldn't make a difference if I had a $1,000 set of golf clubs or I had a $200 set of golf clubs. I need to learn the basics. So that's what I'm doing right now. Baby steps, taking my time, not trying to be, you know, the next Gil Hibben or something. I'm just, you know, doing what I can do. Each knife, I want it to get better than the last, and each knife is a learning experience to learn on the next one. So I've only made 2 knives so far. So I will show you the two that I've made. This first one was one I was kind of like going for like a Becker type shape, but with a thinner style. I did make the Kydex sheath. Yeah, it looks decent. People see it, my friends see it, and oh, that's really cool, man, you made your own knife. But you know anything about knife making, you'll see that the spine of the blade is a good bit, and you can see this or not, it's about 2/3 the thickness of the spine of the rest of the knife, because I kept screwing up so bad, and then I'd sand it out, and then the blade kept getting thinner and thinner. Eventually I had to say, you know what, that's as good as it's going to get. I'm going to move on to the next step, and that's what you got to do. I did everything wrong on this knife that you could do, which is great. I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot of stuff. I cut my ricasso right up through the spine. My flats weren't flat. You name it, you know, you name it, whatever. I made my micarta too thin, you know, whatever. But you know what? I'll never sell this knife ever. It has no price. I don't care, because it's the one that's, you know, teaching me how to make better knives. So that knife also took me about a month to make. And then this is my second knife, and I just made this one in less than a week. By the way, completely hand done. I didn't use a jig. I didn't even use a hand file jig. I just used a grinder and my hands and a bucket of water. So I don't know if you can tell or not, but I'm pretty happy with this one. The flat, it's a chisel grind. The flat is pretty darn flat. I never hit the spine, not once. The ricasso is straight as an arrow. I never even set up a jig for the ricasso. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I just kind of wanted to see if I could do it. So I ground in the ricasso first, just a little bit, not all the way through, just to give me a score line, and I just kept going back and forth. And if you start at the bottom and work your way up, which is the part that everyone's going to look at, if they know what they're looking at in knives, they're going to say, did he booger up that flat on the spine? After you do back and forth from the bottom, by the time you get to the top, you've gone back and forth, you know, probably a couple hundred times. So by the time you get to that top, you should be pretty darn good at keeping your line straight. And that movement should be pretty well ingrained in what you're doing. So by the time I got to the top, it was like cake. I just kept on going, got it where I wanted, and I was done. It was it. Maybe an hour later, I was completely done. And this thing was pretty close to perfect, except for sanding. I was really happy with it. Micarta, made by hand. A lot of people have been surprised about that. It's a paper micarta. Just layered it up, put it in a jig. Just do a YouTube search on making paper micarta, and there's a guy on there, I don't even know the video, it's like 18 minutes long, and the guy's like, I call him the anal retentive micarta maker. He's a knife maker. If you're out there, I'm sorry, but dude, it's awesome. He makes micarta with no gloves, no mess at all. It's completely self-contained. It's a great way to make micarta. I did it, and I'll tell you what, I'm a believer. You do it in a little plastic container, and just trust me, look it up, it's great. Oh, also sheaths. Two different types of sheaths. I'm pretty happy with them. They're just pancake style. I did this is the last knife I did. Built-in little belt loop, a la Walter Sorrells. Look up his videos too. He's awesome. So yeah, you want the two schools of thought on knife making? Look up Walter Sorrells, and look up Aaron Go. Okay, G-O-U-G-H. Walter's like he's like a soul surfer type knife maker. He's, you know, he freehand grinds. He makes katanas. And he's like the most relaxing dude to watch. Even if you don't make knives, watch his videos. He's very entertaining. He's also an author, apparently, and he's a great guy. He seems like a really fun guy. But I watched his video for the pancake sheath. Great job. And if you want to learn how to make jigs and how to be super precise about everything that you do and make it into a science, which is also good to know, watch Aaron's videos. He does great stuff, and the dude is like a machine. You know, he just can put stuff out there. He's like the Terminator of knife making. You know, everything he does is very precise, extremely precise. So if you want to if you want a benchmark for how to do it exact, watch his videos too, and watch Walter's too, because he's just a great guy to watch. So that's it. So hope I didn't talk your ear off too much. But bottom line, other than, you know, if you've got a shop and you're like a middle-aged dude like me who has kids, you've probably got some tools already. You know, tool-wise, I probably spent out of pocket. I pretty much just bought this grinder. That's it. I lucked into some stuff, but you don't have to go crazy, I don't think. You know, especially not starting out. Get your feet wet, get in there, do it, and you know, just take each knife for what it is. It's a learning experience to get better on the next knife. Be happy with it, move on, get better. That's it. All right, so that's the end of the tour. So I hope this was helpful. Hope you found it interesting, and get out there and just start grinding. Thanks.